You've heard of a glow-up, the idea of transforming into something radiant, something better. But in the early 1900s, hundreds of young women experienced a glow-up that was horrifyingly literal. They literally shone in the dark. Their clothes, their hair, their skin, even their smiles glowed with an unearthly light. They were told it was harmless, that it was a miracle. They were the envy of their towns, with some of the best-paying jobs a woman could get. But the truth wasn't a success story. It was a death sentence. This is the story of the Radium Girls, and how the most sought-after substance on Earth ate them alive from the inside out. It started with a toothache, then another. Teeth loosened and fell out with terrifying ease, leaving behind ulcers that wouldn't heal, wounds that seeped pus and blood. Then came the bone pain, a creeping deep agony. Spines crumbled, hips spontaneously fractured. Young women in their 20s needed full-body braces just to stand. In some of the most severe cases, a doctor's gentle touch during an examination could cause an entire jawbone to shatter in their mouth. They were suffering from a condition we now call radium jaw. Their bones were disintegrating, and they were all connected by one thing: their job. They were watch dial painters, and they were being poisoned by the very thing that made them shine: radium. But here's what makes this story a true horror. The people in charge knew, and they did nothing. The United States Radium Corporation and others like it were defense contractors. The men running the plants, the chemists who formulated the luminous paint, they understood the dangers. They handled radium with lead screens, masks, and tongs. Meanwhile, they told the women the paint was safe. They encouraged them to use a technique called lip dip paint, using their lips to point the fine brushes, ingesting radium with every stroke. When the women started getting sick and dying, the company's response wasn't concern. It was a campaign of denial and victim blaming. They claimed the women had died from syphilis, trying to smear their reputations. They said they'd hired unfit women out of charity. They even commissioned a safety study from Harvard, and then altered the damning report before sending it to the state. The factories kept running, the profits kept flowing, and the workers kept dying. To understand the human cost, we need to talk about one woman, Mollie Maggia. Mollie was 24 years old and had worked at the US radium plant in Orange, New Jersey for 4 years. She was like the others, proud of her skilled work and her good wages. Her nightmare began in 1922 with that simple toothache. A dentist pulled the tooth, but the socket never healed. Ulcers formed. Her pain became uncontrollable. One by one, her teeth were extracted or fell out on their own. The infection, which wasn't an infection at all, spread savagely through her jaw. Her entire lower jawbone was surgically removed in a desperate attempt to stop it. It was useless. The disease raged through her body. On September 12th, 1922, just shy of her 25th birthday, Mollie Maggia died. The official cause? Syphilis, a convenient, shameful diagnosis provided by company doctors. But Mollie's body told a different story. Her death was so gruesome and strange it became a key piece of evidence. She was the first dial painter to die, and her case helped a pathologist named Dr. Harrison Martland begin to crack the real cause. Mollie Maggia didn't die of a social disease. She was killed by her job, and her story was just the beginning. If stories like this matter to you, and you want more underreported history about workers who were never meant to be heard from, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps this kind of story reach more people who'd never otherwise see it. The breakthrough came from Dr. Harrison Martland, the chief medical examiner of Newark. Skeptical of the syphilis claims, he began autopsies on the deceased women, including Mollie Maggia. What he found was revolutionary and chilling. Radium, when ingested, behaves like calcium. It gets deposited in the bones where it sits, emitting constant, powerful alpha radiation. It wasn't attacking them from the outside, it was destroying them from within, bombarding their bone marrow and tissue 24 hours a day. Martland developed a test to prove the living women were contaminated. He estimated that by 1925, at the New Jersey plant alone, at least 50 women were ill, and a dozen had already died. His work provided the irrefutable scientific link. But even with this documented evidence, the companies fought back. They commissioned their own studies to contradict Martland. They pressured other doctors not to release data. The women, now radioactive themselves, were not just sick. They were trapped in a system actively working to silence them. So how did this happen? How did so much poison get inside them? It was all in the process. The paint was a mix of powdered radium, a phosphor, gum and water. To paint the tiny numbers on watch dials, some as small as a millimetre wide, the women used fine camel hair brushes. The brushes lost their point quickly. Dipping them in water wasted time and precious radium powder. So the supervisors, some of whom had come from China painting studios, taught them the lip-dip paint technique. Put the brush between your lips, point the bristles with your tongue, dip it in the radium paste, paint a few strokes, repeat, hundreds of times a day. With each point, they swallowed a little more radium. The dust was everywhere, floating in the air, settling on their skin, their hair, their clothes. They left work glowing like ghosts, which they thought was a glamorous perk. They were told it was safe, even beneficial. Some even painted their nails and teeth for fun. The method was used because it was fast, it was cheap, and it maximised profit. The cost was measured in the lives of the workers. As the 1920s wore on, the wave of sickness became impossible for the companies to completely hide. More radium girls came forward. Led by a worker named Grace Fryer, 5 dying women in New Jersey decided to sue the mighty United States Radium Corporation in 1927. Finding a lawyer took 2 years. No one wanted to take on a powerful defense contractor. By the time they finally got their day in court in January 1928, their bodies were the evidence. None could raise their arm to take the oath. 2 were bedridden. Their lawyer, Raymond Berry, needed to prove they were radioactive. He enlisted a physicist named Elizabeth Hughes, who had once worked for the radium company itself. Using a sensitive electroscope, she tested the women's breath. She proved they were exhaling radon gas, a definitive sign that radium was decaying inside their bodies. The company's lawyers attacked her credentials, but the science was undeniable. Faced with damning proof and a furious public reading about these living dead women in newspapers nationwide, the company settled. It was a victory, but a bittersweet one. All 5 women were dead within a few years. The New Jersey case set a precedent, but the fight wasn't over. In Ottawa, Illinois, women at the Radium Dial Company were falling ill, told their radium was purer and safer. One of them, Catherine Wolfe Donahue, took her employer to court in 1937. By this time, she was emaciated, unable to walk, and nearing the end of her life. Testifying from her stretcher, she won. Her case in 1938 finally broke the cycle of denial for good. The legacy of these women is monumental. Their suffering directly led to the establishment of occupational disease labour laws. Their cases were studied by scientists on the Manhattan Project, shaping modern radiation safety standards. And in 1970, their story was a foundational reason for the creation of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. The principle that an employer is responsible for the health of its employees was forged in their battle. Today, radium is synonymous with danger. We look back at radium toothpaste and tonics as the height of ignorance. But the core pattern of the Radium Girls tragedy is not a relic. A 2017 article from the National Safety Council argues that very little has changed since those days when it comes to exposing workers to untested chemicals. Workers are still often the first indicators of a substance's toxicity. We see echoes of their legal struggle in modern cases against medical device and pharmaceutical companies. The same tactics appear: delaying trials, blaming the victim, using legal technicalities to avoid accountability, and exploiting the difficulty of proving a direct link between exposure and illness. The Radium Girls fought for the right to a safe workplace. Their victory established the rules. But their story is a permanent warning that the promise of profit can still blind corporations to the cost in human lives. The dial painting studios are silent now. The companies are gone. But the next time you glance at a watch in the dark or hear about a miracle cure, or assume someone else is looking out for worker safety, remember the Radium Girls. Remember the ghostly glow that wasn't magic but poison. Remember the women who shone brilliantly, not for their own glory, but as a horrifying beacon that forced the world to see the cost of unchecked industry. They paid for every second of light with a lifetime of agony, and in doing so, they gave future generations a fighting chance. If you want more dark, underreported history like this, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who should know this story.